Hi, everybody. Welcome to Andy's Licorice Talk. We have an unusual but very special guest today, Lawrence Gilliard Jr. Welcome, Lawrence.
Thank you. Thank you. What's up, Andy?
So the last time I saw him, I'm going to say it was 1987, if we're lucky, 88.
Somewhere in there. Whenever when you graduated and walked out those doors of Juilliard, that was it. So whenever your graduation year was, that was the last I saw you.
So usually I start with how I know the guest. So basically I'm going to say 1984, give and take. Okay, there was a really terrific music festival in Waterloo, New Jersey. The clarinet section, we were students, was John Manassi, myself, Ray McClellan, right? And there was
Robert the Ludus there, maybe?
Oh, well, hold on. So you guys were high school kids.
Yes.
And Pat Takahashi was a librarian who happened to be married to William Blaney, who was Lawrence's mentor and big influence as a child, I'd say.
He was my high school clarinet professor. So and so he's like, when we were in high school, me and Robert the Ludus, we were all down here in Baltimore, and he's like, I want to take you guys to this festival. You're good enough. And I'm like, holy crap. And we went to Waterloo, man, and I met all you cats. It was amazing.
Yeah, so he was the young punk. Smile ear to ear, so serious, incredibly friendly, but really, serious guy about his clarinet, incredibly friendly. As he said, some of you might know Robert DeLutis. He's a professor in University of Maryland, and also used to play in the Rochester Philharmonic. And so he came along, and they filled out the wind ensemble, and then fast forward, I don't know, 2-3 years.
Yeah, maybe. We were like in the back. We were like fourth clarinets or something back there.
Those were the days when you were still respectful, Lawrence. And anyway, so they both show up. The two punks show up at Juilliard a couple of years later, and so he was a fixture. Whenever we played in all these little wind classes and stuff, and I disappeared to Hong Kong, and about 25 years later, someone says, you should check out this TV show. It's called The Wire. It's like, that's a stupid name. Well, okay, fine. So I put on the opening episode, and it's like 3 minutes of this guy just looking around on his face. So I'm like, I know that face. So I was with someone and saying, I'm telling you, I know this guy. He plays the clarinet. She's like, get out of here! Come on, I mean, drug dealer, cop,
drug dealer, straight hood dude. He does not play the clarinet, right?
So I Google it, and it's like, well, this and that and this, and I realized, oh my God, this guy has been up to a couple of things since I left 30 years ago. And we get down to the last second scroll. The last sentence says, little known fact about Lawrence Gilliard Jr. He used to play the clarinet at Juilliard. And I'm like, yes. So, and one other time when our friend Robert held like sort of a clarinet weekend.
Oh, yes.
I clicked on, some things were going online. I don't remember how many years ago. And it was really interesting. And this is what inspired me to get Lawrence on our show. He was sort of working with these clarinetists in a masterclass, not like, oh, you used the wrong finger and move your reed up. He was just like trying to get things out of them the way it did. So I thought, wouldn't it be interesting, first of all, to catch up with an old friend, but secondly, talk about it's sort of been entering his life on and off, and just sort of talk about the art forms and how this whole mess is affecting us all. And so anyway, thank you so much for being here, and I really hope you guys enjoyed this, because this is obviously not our typical show today. So let's just start with the present, and then we're going to start from the past. We want to know. I mean, the world's been locked down, and everyone's been going to Netflix, and everyone's been watching TV. So first things first, we in the music world, all we're doing is complaining about our concerts are canceled, social distance, we're non-essential workers, we're this.
Right.
What's the word on the street with now we're addicted to all these TV shows on Netflix, right? What's the word on the street? Are you going to continue these series next year? Are they socially distanced? Is everyone just as worried in the acting world? I mean, what's the word on the street? What are you guys talking about?
Well, I'm going to tell you, yeah, everyone is just as worried. It's the word on the street on our end is the same on your end. It's like when you're playing an instrument or when you're acting, you can't wear a mask when you're at work. You know what I mean? You can't wear a mask and play the horn. We can't wear a mask and while we're acting. So, yeah, it's the same kind of thing. It feels a little bit like in Hollywood, I've heard about a few people sort of auditioning like self-tape. So now we're doing a lot of self-tape stuff where you just put yourself on tape and send it instead of actually going to the room. But a really good friend of mine, my brother-in-law actually, who's also an actor, he told me recently he was in LA and he had this audition and he had to wait outside for a very long time. Finally, he thought he was going up to meet the casting director and everyone. And he gets up into the room and it's just a cameraman and everybody else is on Skype. so he's like, he still wasn't in the room with the actual people. You know what I mean? Everyone is, so it's pretty crazy. I think it's slowly trying to open up. I mean, eventually it has to in some way, right? And I've heard that they were talking about maybe if people are going into production, taking the cast and crew and everyone, getting everybody tested, and then just quarantining everyone in the same hotel. And you're basically going from hotel to work and back until the show is done, just so you're not, mixing with other people. It's a crazy time, a crazy thing. And, we'll see what happens with it all.
But let's start with this. Starting next season, are these TV shows on hold? Are there no new episodes that we're going to
see coming on? Well, right before they shot a few shows, like right before we went into this whole quarantine thing, and not only that, like the networks and especially the cable stations, they have backlogs of material, like of stuff that they put on the shelf and didn't use. And you're going to be seeing all that stuff coming off the shelf, and you're going to be, we're going to be watching things that, maybe at some point they were like canceled or wasn't going to use, but now they need to fill those slots. We're going to be watching a whole lot of reruns of things until they're up and running and starting to produce new material, But Netflix has so much. I mean, me personally, I think it's overwhelming how much stuff is on right now. It's too much stuff. If you ask me, it's hard to even decide what to watch anymore because there's so much content right now. So, we just have to wait and see. I mean, I was in Los Angeles in late February, early March, right before they shut everything down for pilot season, looking to get on a new show, and it all got shut down. So, I'm kind of hanging out there like, well, just got to wait and see what happens.
Yeah. I mean, we, we have enough problems with putting on concerts or whatever, but we have openings in the orchestra, and I have students or whatever who've applied for openings in other orchestras. Like, what do you even do with that? I mean, we're not even, just like you're saying, I mean, we're not even talking about what you're doing. You're on hold in a way, doing a pilot. Right. Just no one knows what's going on. So
I think in all the arts, except for maybe, and even with like art, like actual painters and artists, and I mean gallery openings, all that stuff is kind of shut down, and it's weird. It's weird and it's hard. I think it's especially hard on artists.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks for sharing that with us. So now we're going to get into we're going to get it. We're going to start from the beginning. Man, okay. Am I allowed to say where you are, what city you're in?
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. So Lawrence is in Baltimore. He's in Baltimore. Yes. Where I guess you were born and raised. Certainly raised.
No. So there's some other little unknown stuff. So I was born in New York.
Okay.
I'm a Harlem boy. I'm a New York. I'm actually more a New Yorker than I am a Baltimorean. So I claim them both. 50-50. So I was born in New York and I lived in New York till I was 7. My mom and dad split, and my mom is from Baltimore. So when my mom and dad split, she moved back home to Baltimore and brought me and my sister along, had 2 more children. And, so I'm the eldest of 4. And I 10 years growing up in Baltimore. And then at 17, I left to go back to New York to Gilliard. Right.
You were following me around, man.
Right. So I say because my father was in New York and my grandmother, like I had a lot of family in New York and a lot of family in Baltimore. So every holiday and like birthdays and stuff, I would always travel back and forth to New York. Like it's only a 3-hour trip or something like that, back and forth from Baltimore to New York. So I never really felt like I left New York, although I was living in Baltimore. But I'll tell you, when I was living in Baltimore, I always knew, I'm like, as soon as I'm out of school, I'm back in New York. Like I just love that city, New York. But Baltimore has a really special place in my heart because it raised me, you know? And I mean, it raised me, but also like, it's ironic that I was on the show The Wire because The Wire was actually taking place in the neighborhood that I grew up in. So,
really?
You know?
Right in the neighborhood?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Like the Barksdales and the projects that, you know, were represented in there, the Lexington Terrace projects. I played Little League football for the Lexington Terrace projects, which is where the Barksdales operated back then. And, you know, David Simon was writing stories about guys who I knew who had been, you know, in the game and all that. It was like it was like a crazy circle that I went in coming back to Baltimore to work on The Wire. Amazing. Having grown up here in the neighborhood where it all happened.
Crazy. So let's get to when did clarinet enter your life, and what did
oh man, it was so that is so crazy. So here I am, I'm this kid, and I'm going to the school, Harlem Park Middle School, which was at the time it was the worst middle school in Baltimore City. It was like the first.
How old were you?
Oh, dude, I was, what's middle school age? Like 11, 12?
Okay.
Something like that. Yeah, because let's see, 14 was when I started high school, right? So yeah, it had to be like 13, 12, like that, right? So I'm in this middle school and, well, let me go back to this. When I was in elementary school, I'll go back to that. I was in the 4th grade or something like that. And I've always wanted to play drums. Like drums have always been my passion. And I also do play drums. Like I'm a self-taught drummer though, but that has always been my passion. The thing is, all young cats want to play drums because it's cool and they know the girls like the drummers, right? So,
I had this conversation with my mom too in 4th grade.
Yeah, right. So when every time I went to try to, you know, sign up for the drums for band, it's like we already have enough drummers. So when I was in like 4th or 5th grade or something like that, the only thing that was left was the clarinet. So I played clarinet back then for like a few months. And in elementary school, clarinet is like what? They teach you like 5 notes or something like that. It's like, you know, bum, 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 right? So I learned my 5 notes. And that was it for clarinet for me. And I never wanted to see it ever again. So then here I go, I get into middle school and I'm like, you know, 12 or whatever, 12, 13, 12, like 12. And I'm like, I want to play drums. We got enough drummers. All right, I want to play guitar. Okay, so they give me a guitar. And one day I'm sitting in the room practicing my guitar and the band teacher comes in, opens the door. He's like, hand me your guitar. I give him the guitar. He's like, we need a clarinet player in the band. And your friends told me that you played clarinet. And he forced me to play clarinet in the band. And I was like, I don't play clarinet. He was like, they told me that you do. Here, take the clarinet, and now you're playing that. So I take the clarinet, and as fate would have it, we had one television in my house, and the television broke. And so the only thing that I had to entertain myself was practicing the clarinet. So I would actually, at that time, I couldn't really like read music, you know, I was learning. And so I was kind of learning everything by ear, and I was learning, you know, you go to middle school, they teach you what, 10 notes? It's like, you know, I don't even think I could play above the octave key, like in middle school. So I started learning just songs by ear from the radio, you know. I learned like Chuck Mangioni's Feel So Good and, you know, like crazy stuff. And I remember asking my music teacher one time, I was like, what does this key on the back do? And he's like, oh, you press that and then you can play above the, and I'm like, all right. learned how to do that. And that's how I got involved sort of in the clarinet. And at the time, my high school, the School for the Arts, they were brand new. This was when I was like, this was when I was in 8th grade or something like that. They came to my school looking for students. Like now, there's kids coming from all over the world to try to get into that school. But at that time, the school had only been open for 1 year. So they were recruiting students. And they came to my middle school, the worst middle school in the city, looking for kids. And I was like, I want to go there, to that school. And my music teacher said, you'll never get in. He said, you're going to be auditioning with kids who've been taking private lessons since they were 3 and blah, 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 and you'll never get in. And I couldn't, like I said, I only knew like a few notes. I didn't really know how to read music. I was learning from ear. But I told my mother and I told my music teacher, I was like, I want to do it. So he was like, he didn't have any music. He was like, I don't have any music. Like he was just fighting me on it. Finally, he said, go look in that room over there. It was like a closet. It's like, go look in that closet over there and see if there's some music in there. And I went in there and I found this a cassette tape with a book with the music. And it was a trumpet book though. It was a trumpet. But I knew that the clarinet and the trumpet played the same, clef, the same. So I was like, all right. I took it home and I played the cassette tape and I learned the song by ear. And my mother, thank God bless her, she believes in me. She took me to the audition and I played the whole piece by ear and pretended to be reading the music. and the accompanist played along. And I got accepted into the school. They asked me to play one scale. Thank God it was the only scale I knew, a C major scale, 1 octave of a C major scale. I played the 1 octave of the C major scale, and I don't know what that did and me playing the song, but Bill Blaney, God bless him, found it in his heart to accept me into the clarinet department at the Baltimore School for the Arts. And that was the beginning of my clarinet life.
Awesome. Was DeLutis, was he at the school as well?
No, so Robert DeLutis went to Perry Hall. And I learned of Robert DeLutis when I was in my, I was in my freshman year of high school, but it was towards the end of the year. They were talking about things like state band, state orchestra, stuff like that. And then I'm doing a recital, my very first recital as a freshman at the School for the Arts. Wow. And this dude shows up with like a full mustache and he's like 14 or something, right? And Bill Blaney's like, this is Robert DeLutis. You guys are the same age. He goes to Perry. I'm like, what? Now, before he came to school, I had already heard about him because Bill Blaney had talked about him. But not only him, Robert's brother played trombone. And they were famous in like in the high school world of music here in Baltimore. The DeLutis brothers were famous. So when I heard that Robert DeLutis was coming to my recital, I was like, oh crap, I better be good. And then I knew he was my age, but then he showed up with this full mustache. I'm like, yo, he's not my age, he's grown already, That's when we met after my, our freshman year, I guess. But he went to Perry Hall and he was already just such an outstanding player. I mean, him and his brother were just so super ridiculously talented. And, here's another thing, and Robert probably knows this, I don't know, but the reason that I reached the level I reached was because I was always chasing Robert. And my mother got so tired of hearing about Robert DeLutis in my house. Because I was always just talking about how good Robert can play this and Robert can play that. And Robert's like this. And my mother would always say, you're good too. You can play too. You're good. But I was always chasing Robert, and he's the reason that, I continued to move up the level that I, got to the level that I got to.
Yeah. It's really great when you're that age and you have sort of a friend and a competitor in this. And I had something like that. And it's incredibly valuable, I think. You probably, I probably a few years later, you would have been a different person had you not run into Robert,
And run into Robert. Absolutely. I mean, the guy, when I was a freshman and I was like 4th clarinet or whatever, there was a guy named Doug. I can't think of Doug's last name, but he was the first clarinetist at the school. at the time that it had only been open for a year. So, you know, he'd only been studying with Mr. Blaney for a short time, but he was a really good clarinetist, but he didn't really push like me, you know, or he didn't inspire me really, you know. It was something about Robert. Maybe it was because we were close in age, and maybe because it was how serious he was about his playing and about the horn.
Yeah.
That you know, kind of was just inspirational to me. And I was like, yeah, you know, I want to be serious like that. I want to be good like that. And yeah.
Great. So and how now William Blaney, we love shouting out to the older generations and some of that. So he was, I mean, for lack of a better word, a disciple of David Weber. I mean,
absolutely, yes.
You know, and so it was in your DNA. Once you were going to go to Gilliard and study with David Weber, take it or leave it.
Yes,
you know.
Yes, it was like, that's pretty much, yes, that's what it was. It's like you're gonna, I mean, and it wasn't a bad, I wanted to, you know. I'm like, first of all, I was in Baltimore and I'm like, I'm only auditioning. I only auditioned for schools in New York. That's how much I wanted to be back in New York, right? So I auditioned for Juilliard, I auditioned for Manhattan, of course, and I auditioned for Manus, right? Okay. And I got all three, you know, thank God. I got all three because I told my mother, it was crazy. I was like, Mom, if I don't get into any of these three schools, I'm going into the military.
She loved that one, right?
You know? I was like, I want to be a Top Gun pilot. I want to fly a plane. That's what I wanted to do. So I was like, if I don't get in any of these schools, and that was the only time, the one time ever in my life that my mother, she was like, okay. She left the room. It was quiet for like 30 seconds. And then she came back in the room and let me have it. You're not going into the military, blah, blah, you know, this is why, because guys who go into, because my dad was in the military. He went to Vietnam, and he's one of those guys who, you know, was young, got drafted into Vietnam, came back a different person. Yeah. And, you know, and so she has certain feelings about that. You know what I mean? It's personal for her. And I guess she was like, my son is not going down that route. So that was the one time that she was like, you're not doing that. but I got into Juilliard, which was kind of, you know, it made everybody was ecstatic about it, especially Mr. Blaney and me, you know. And it was all, I mean, the Juilliard experience, it's a special place. You know what I mean? I mean, you're in school and you know that you're in school. When you go to the library and you get out a history book, right? And it's talking about all the outstanding musicians in this book, and you realize they're your teachers. It's insane.
Or even the author might be your teacher. I had one of those.
Right. Yeah. It's just another level. Mm-hmm. You know, and a kid like me coming from inner city Baltimore is like, you never think you're gonna be, you know, living that life or in a space like that. So it was intimidating in a way, but it was also just special and magical for me in a way, just to be there, to get, first of all, to even get in. People don't realize, like my sister, I have a sister whose daughter, she's a singer, and she's thinking about auditioning for Juilliard. My sister never thought, you know, she never knew the percentage of kids who audition versus the one who actually get in. Yeah. She was looking at it and she's like, what? And she realizes the small percentage of kids that got in, and she's like, wow. She was like, oh, wow, you got in. Like, she's like, it's like a miracle. Like, that's almost like a miracle. I'm like, yeah, it really was. It really is.
So we'll move right into your New York stuff, but just before we leave, so I mean, what did the Baltimore School for the Arts? What did it mean to you during those 4 years? How did it change you? What direction did it move you in? And how about Bill Blaney as well?
I'll tell you, you know, the Baltimore School for the Arts changed my life, and I wouldn't be the man that I am. I wouldn't have the careers that I've had without the Baltimore School for the Arts, you know, and without Bill Blaney, because Bill Blaney, what Bill Blaney taught me through the School for the Arts, he taught me an amazing work ethic, you know, and he taught me, you know, how he showed me he didn't, like, some people can tell you a thing, but then some people can show you a thing. He showed me the importance of hard work and he showed me how when you work in a certain way, how you will reap certain benefits, the outcomes of working a certain way. He'd play a song for me and I'd go, that's amazing, that's incredible, it's impossible to do. And he'd say, okay, start here. If you play this way, by this time, you'll be able to play that song. Right? If you practice this way, by this time, you'll be able to play that song. And what I have to do but trust him. So I would do it. And by that time, I can play that song. That's teaching me, oh, okay, if I work in this way, then I can do this by this time. I can, and it's actually showing you how to succeed. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that it's possible to succeed. So, and that's everything. That's everything. You've got so many kids out here, and I would have been that kid. These kids out here who don't have that person to show them, to actually show them, not just tell them, because anybody can show up. I can show up today and say, hey guys, work real hard, go to school, get your education. And that's the beginning of it doesn't mean anything unless you show someone, you know what I mean? And so that's what he did. And the School for the Arts also, living in inner city Baltimore, you're living with a certain demographic of people. When you go to a school like the Baltimore School for the Arts, you're mixing the demographics. You've got people from the city, you've got kids from the city, kids from the county, kids from other states. They're all coming in, and you're learning different cultures, you're learning about different people, you're forced to work together, you're all motivating each other because you're artists, which can be crazy. Throw a whole bunch of young artists together in a small school. Just bursting with like hormones and artistic, just trying to, that's crazy.
And no egos involved at all, right?
Right, exactly, right.
But actually, yeah, let me just interrupt because I'm curious, because you're talking about, you grew up in like the worst neighborhood in Baltimore, the Wire neighborhood. Was it weird, like coming? It's like, so where were you? Well, I'm practicing Mozart on the clarinet. Were you weird? I mean, how was that?
Absolutely. I was absolutely the weird, nerdy kid. And what's funny is, like, before I started playing the clarinet, yeah, I was actually I was in sports, and I excelled in sports. So I had trophies, like football trophies, basketball trophies, ping pong trophies, pool, baseball. Like, I went to the Little League World Series here, inner city. I was like, track and field. I did all the sports, right? And I excelled in it. And so when I started playing clarinet, I remember telling Mr. Blaney, I was still playing football when I was at the School for the Arts. And I remember telling Mr. Blaney, and he's like, you've got to make a choice. Mm-hmm. He's like, you have to choose sports or music. He's like, but you can't do both, because if you break a finger, right, there's no practicing, there's no playing. You got to choose. And I chose music. But yeah, and once I chose music, all my homies around my neighborhood, they would still come and get me to play sports. Yo, let's go to the court. Yo, let's go play some ball, whatever. And I had to turn and say no. And they're like, what? They just they couldn't understand this whole classical clarinet music thing. And, I think another thing, like, a lot of people, they would see me with my horn and the clarinet, and they're like, oh, you playing jazz? Like, a lot of people would try to make me switch to jazz. And, that's just the neighborhood I was in. Mm. What it did was motivated me even more to be like, look, I'm a classical clarinetist. This is what I do. Get used to it, accept it. This is what I do, right? But yeah, I was the nerdy. I wasn't that much the nerdy guy because I did the whole sports thing first. So I was respected in my neighborhood, but it was just, people were kind of weirded out by it. And eventually they weren't inviting me to play ball anymore. And it was fine because, I was being invited to play chamber music down in school. So
yeah. Well, I told you before, I actually had the opportunity of giving a little recital and a master class at the Baltimore School for the Arts 25 years ago or something like that. Wow. And not only were the kids so enthusiastic. I mean, they were very, I was amazed by the diversity, just what you talked about, the cultural diversity that was going on. And I was really impressive. And I think it's a great place that, that you were nurtured in,
amazing. It's an amazing, it changes lives. That school changes lives,
So it needs to be said, needs to be said that Lawrence's 2 kids have just graduated from there. So you've continued to support them for you.
Yes. Yeah, we were living in LA at the time. My daughter said she wanted to be an actor. She wanted to study acting, and I knew the school had like Jada Pinkett went there and Tupac went there, and we're in the drama department. I was like, all right, well, so we came back, so for the school, so she could, and then my son, for my daughter to go, and then eventually my son went also in the drama department there. So he just graduated this year, 2020, via the online graduation, internet, Zoom or whatever they did to graduate, which was crazy.
Well, congratulations.
But, they both. And I'll tell you though, what's funny is I had such an amazing experience at the school, and my kids had a good experience too, but their experience was so different from my experience, and I never thought about how it might be different, but they had a completely different experience from me. And a lot of it was because, they grew up in a completely different way. They grew up in California. I was already acting. We were living a certain lifestyle. They were dealing with certain type. They were already dealing with a lot of diversity. They grew up in that, and they grew up in, me being an actor by that time, with actors hanging around and stuff like that. So when they got to the school, it wasn't like when I got to the school, it was like I just got into Oz. Like, what is this? What is this place? What is this amazing, colorful, the yellow brick road? When they got to the school, it was just like, a bunch of artists,
Okay, so
they had a bit of a.
Let's move to Gilliard now. Now we're in New York, and have you met David Weber before? Have you taken lessons with them?
Only at the audition. Only at the audition.
Really? I'm amazed.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, only at the audition. I'd met him at the audition. And a little bit before, like we talked, like you go in. We met a little bit before. He gave me some notes on what to do. But it was audition day. A little bit of audition and build. Be confident but yeah, that was really the first time that I met him. Just heard about him, wow. And heard his music, of course. And I'd heard his music, of course.
So now you're starting. You're starting as a freshman. You're in New York. Now you're at Gilliard. And you're with your teacher's role model. And so in his teachings, was it almost just an extension of going where Bill was taking you, or was there something new, or what you expected or what you didn't expect, or what was that like?
It felt like an extension. It was absolutely an extension, I mean, they're both, like you said, like like David Weber is Yoda and Bill Blaney is like Obi-Wan, right? Right. So it's absolutely just an extension, of the technique and the training, but they were very different styles, of teaching. Mr. Blaney was more likely to just cut you some slack and say, hey, okay. And as as a player and as a teacher yourself, I'm sure, when a student has practiced and when a student hasn't practiced. Like you can't fake that you've practiced, So Bill Blaney would do things like, he'd say, all right, so you didn't practice that this week. Let's do something else and work on this, or let's work on it now. But Weber would say stuff like, you didn't practice, get out of here, go practice.
Good.
You didn't practice, get out of here. Or you didn't practice, pack up your horn and we'll talk about something else. Like, or, he was just not, he wasn't playing around. You know what I mean? He wasn't trying to cut you any breaks. And that's how I tell my kids that, you know, I'm like, man, when you're in the classical music world and you're dealing on a serious level, it's like people don't have time to play games, and, you know, it's a serious business, and you have a job to do, and you need to do that. You know what I mean? To do it. And of course, that's the difference between, you know, when you get from high school to college. Nobody's going to hold your hand. Nobody's going to make sure you show up on class on time and write you, you know, or, you know, a detention letter or whatever. No, it's up to you to do what you need to do. So if I didn't do what I need to do, Weber would let me know in a serious way. Look, are you serious or not? You know, and it just made me. I'm like, oh, okay, this is a different scene. It's different, you know, and I better get serious, real serious. Which reminds me of another thing that happened one time, man. We were playing Mahler 5, I think. And what was the conductor's name? A brother. Oh God, I can't think of his name right now. It's gonna come to me.
Oh yeah.
Oh my gosh. But we were playing Mahler 5, and I remember, like, I hadn't really practiced, and there's some really tricky stuff, you know, it's Mahler. So it's tricky stuff. And I'm like the only Black guy, like I'm the only brother in the orchestra. And he's conducting, and he's a brother. And dude, we're playing.
This is making me crazy. He just died. I think. I think.
Oh my God. I think it begins with
making me nuts. The priest. Yes.
The priest. Yes. Yeah. The priest is conducting.
I knew John Ye is here, and I was about to say, John, help us out, because he's like an encyclopedia. Thanks, John.
The priest, right?
The priest. Yeah. So he was conducting, right? Yeah.
He's conducting, and I was down on like I was on bass, like I was down on like their clarinet. So I was like, I had the bass, I had the E flat, I had the, you know, the B flat, and I just remember we're playing some stuff, blah, 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 and I'm sight reading this, blah, 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 and I hit like 1 or 2 notes, and dude gave me a look that basically if he could have made me disappear, like, or if I could have disappeared in that moment, and it was so fast, it was like, who even heard it? But he did, and he looked, dude, he looked straight at me and gave me this look, and moment. I mean, you know, it's serious. I tell my kids and my wife, I'm like, look, you know, you miss a note, the conductor will stop the whole band, stop the whole orchestra, and be like, you play this section or whatever. So you better make sure you're prepared, you're on your P's and Q's. So that's what it was like. And, you know, with Weber, he's like, you know, when you come to your lesson, make sure you're prepared and you're ready for it.
Okay, well, I want to document something on the internet right now. We heard from Lawrence Gilliard, okay, that, you know, for those people that think I have an easy job, right? We've heard from him. Growing up in the worst neighborhood in Baltimore was less scary than dropping a note and having a conductor call you out on that. Yes?
That's right. That is right.
That. Great.
That's right. You're in a room full of your peers and everyone's looking at you. You're like, oh snap. I mean, it's gone both ways for me. You know, I mean, of course, you know, there are those moments where they cut the orchestra and they're like, you play this moment, because they want the orchestra to hear what's happening in that section, in that moment. And then you nail it. And you're like, you know, I've had those moments too.
The glory moments.
The glory moments. That's right.
That's great. So now you're Gilliard, and
gosh, Gilliard, yeah.
So how many years were you at Gilliard before then David Schifrin came in? So how many years were you with Weber?
I was with Weber for 3. So David Schifrin came in my senior year. Yeah, he switched up in my senior year, and he came in my senior year, and what's crazy, you know, he was the very first person that I confided in that I didn't feel like I wanted a career in music anymore, and I wanted to maybe be an actor or do something else.
Yeah, I don't want to put him on the spot, but we had a conversation about a year and a half ago. We were just talking about old students and stuff. And he said, I think he's fascinated by you and everything, how it all went. And he's like, yeah, you know. So I said, well, how do you, because I wanted to like kind of, you know, I just The Wire. I was trying to make heads and tails out of all this. And I'm like, so what was that all about? And he goes, you know, he used to come in and say, look, I don't know if I'm really getting what I want out of music. And he goes, I just tell him to practice more.
Right. You know, he was so good, you know, to me, and such a good guy, such an amazing teacher for the year that I had him, because he was like, look, listen, he was like, what have you played? So I showed him a list of, I was like, I played this, and he's like, all right, you can play. Right? He's like, you can obviously play. And I'm like, all right, cool. And it was coming up to, I think, jury time or something like that. He's like, you know, just pick whatever you want to play. It's not a big deal. I know that you can play the horn. And he's like, and I'm like, well, look, I'm going to be honest with you. You know, I don't think that I want to do this. And I think I want, you know, I may be thinking about doing something else. And you know what he said? He said, listen, you have an amazing foundation. If you ever want to come back, it'll be here for you. You know what to do. You know how to practice. You know how to build your chops back. You know how to do these things. If you ever want to come back, it'll be there for you. And that gave me a lot of confidence. That was the best thing that anyone could have said, because I'm like, you know, you feel like if you stop, you're going to lose it forever. And, you know, the music and the horn is a special thing. You know, you don't want to really ever lose it forever. And so he gave me the confidence to say, he's like, look, if you want to go and try that, then go do that thing. If that's where it's leading you and you have a passion for it, go and do that thing. This will be here for you if you ever want to come back, you know, which was special to me. And I thank him for that.
So was it that you just thought you had enough at the time of music, or
what happened?
Were you seduced by an acting career, or both, or one or the other, or what?
It was both. It's sad to say, I did get bored. Like I got bored with the horn and with the music. So I was going crazy in the school at that particular time, and I didn't know why. Eventually looking back in retrospect, I figured out why. What happened was I couldn't, me personally, Lawrence, express myself enough through the horn and through classical. Classical, as you know, is a very structured thing. You know, you can only do so much. There's some things that you can really improvise, have fun, and play with, but then some of it is like you got to play Mozart like Mozart, or it ain't Mozart. You know, so it becomes a very structured thing. And for me, and you know, even going through, you know, the time periods of the music, you know, the classical and then the romantic, and when you go through, there's structure to it. You know, there's the ABA, and you know, there's structure to it. It doesn't matter what you're playing, there's a structure to it. Eventually you learn the chord changes, you know what's gonna happen, you know what's coming, you learn the music. And so what happened was, eventually I didn't even realize I was going through it, but I was getting bored and I didn't even know. And one day I woke up and I was like, I don't feel like practicing today. And on that day, I knew there was a problem. And I would just force myself to practice. I just started forcing myself to practice at that moment. Now, when I started thinking, I don't feel like practicing, excuse me, let me drink some water. When I started thinking, I don't feel like practicing, I started questioning, well, what else is it that I want to do? Because all I've ever wanted to do since, you know, high school, freshman year high school, was, you know, play clarinet and play for the New York Philharmonic. You know? So I started thinking, what else do I want to do? What else do I have a passion? And then one day it just zinged in my head. I'm like, you know, I always went to all of my high school drama performances. And I always went to all of the Gilliard drama performances because I always had a fascination with actors. I was always fascinated by how they could become different characters. Like I would see them, being in a music in an art school, you're in school with actors and dancers and artists, painters. And so I would go and see these kids on stage. They're playing these different characters. And then I'd see them in class and they're back to normal. And I was fascinated by that.
Uh-huh.
So I was like, maybe there's something there. And in between my sophomore year and my junior year, I took an acting class over the summer, a summer intensive course at the American Academy of Dramatic Arts. And by the end of that course, I sort of felt like I had a passion for acting. I was like, I can express myself more through this. I can do more through this. I can, the sky's the limit with this. And that's how I felt. And at that point, I just kind of, my soul and my heart started leaning more toward that way. And I went through my junior year at Gilliard, still forcing myself to practice and, show up. But by my senior year at Gilliard, I was just a total wreck, and there was no, faking it anymore and no lying to myself anymore about it. So the senior year, that's when, like I said, I confided in my teacher, and things kind of just, I switched up from there,
So did you graduate from Gilliard?
So a lot of people don't know this. I don't talk about this a whole lot.
Oh, sorry, man.
Nah, I don't talk about that a whole lot because a part of me feels disappointed in myself a little bit. But I was not in school during my senior year. I was physically there, but my head was not in school. I would show up in the classes. I was not listening. I would doodle on pads or whatever. I just was physically there, but mentally not there. And then, like, I went all the way through to finals. Finals week came around, and I remember I went to play. We were gonna play a piece that I've always wanted to play. Bernstein's. Oh my gosh.
Speaking riffs?
No. Candide. And I was playing first on Candide. Right? And I was like, oh my God, I've always wanted to play this. It's so much fun. It's a lot of fun stuff. I went to the very first rehearsal for Candide, and I literally couldn't get a sound out of my horn.
Huh.
Like, because I had removed myself that much at that point that I was playing, and just the sound, the tone that I wanted it wouldn't come out. And I unpacked my horn, closed, and I walked out.
No kidding.
And it was the senior concert. We're coming up on finals week. All this, it was the end of the year. I went to who was the dean of the music? He was
Brunelli.
He played the French horn, right? No. Yeah. I think he did.
No. Brunelli was a big guy.
Yeah, the big dude. Yeah, I thought he was a French horn. I know. Yeah, it was him. And I was like, I take me off. I was like, take me off the show. I walked out the building, and I never went back.
You're kidding, man.
I got on a bus or something. I came to Baltimore, and I never went back to the school. And people were like trying to reach out to me. Where are you? What happened? And I didn't respond to anybody. I remember finding out about graduation, and everybody had graduated, and I called a few people to say congratulations on graduating, and I never. That was it.
Wow. So now
I would recommend that if there are any students watching, I would not ever recommend that.
Okay.
Anyone.
Okay, all my students that are watching, he was just kidding. He was just kidding.
Yeah. Ignore that last part.
Wow, man. I never knew that. That's heavy. So So now you're in Baltimore. Now you're in Baltimore because I get all that you said, but the part I can't connect with is you were like a couple of weeks away from the paper. So there you were. I mean, you just said, I've had enough. I don't care. You got
I knew that I wouldn't. It was impossible for me to pass my final exams because I hadn't studied. I didn't know any. Like I hadn't learned the material.
Right.
So I knew it was impossible for me to pass my finals. And what I was going to try to do was actually, they have a 3-year certificate program. So I was going to try to use the 3 years that I completed to just get a certificate. Right. And walk across the stage and, walk across the stage. And I was like the first member of my family to go to college.
Wow. Wow.
So I was like, I kind of wanted to do it like for my family to get like something to hang on the wall.
Wow.
But I couldn't do that. Like they wouldn't allow me to do that because they're like, you need to have history 1 and 2 completed to do that. So I would have had to have history 1 and 2 completed by my 3rd year. And I was taking history 2 in my senior year. And so I couldn't get the certificate even. Wow. So I was like, all right. To the point where they had sent me my Gilliard alumni card, like everything, like they were ready for me to graduate. Like, I was, and then I had to give it back.
So now you're in Baltimore off the bus and what, you tell your mom? I mean, what was that conversation like?
It was very easy for her. It was harder for my grandparents because, they were in New York and my grandparents like bought me my first clarinet and, they really didn't understand what was going on. They didn't understand what was going on. My mother was just like, okay, my mother's always been very understanding and very supportive. So she just took me back in, she's like, okay, I get it. You're home now. And, I was like, well, what am I going to do? So I went and got my driver's license to like take my mind off. Like I didn't have my driver's license at this time. So I was like, I'm going to learn how to drive to take my mind off of the fact that everybody else was graduating and all this stuff was passing me by at that point. That whole life, that I'd invested so much in was passing me by. That's how I felt.
Yeah.
But then, I was like, as soon as that was done, then I was like, all right, I got to go back to New York because I want to study acting. And during my senior year, I was taking acting lessons outside of Juilliard.
Uh-huh.
Right. I was really in my senior year just trying to push through for my family, and you learn that you can't do it for your family. Life, you have to do life for yourself. You know what I mean? And so, I was taking acting on the outside while I was trying to force the Juilliard thing to get that piece of paper. And eventually I just had to let Juilliard go.
Wow.
And what's crazy is there were some drama teachers at Juilliard. There's this guy named Jonathan Sticks. First of all, there was a girl there. She was a girl back then. She's grown up with Lisa Gay Hamilton, who's a really good buddy of mine. When we were in school, she's in LA now. I haven't seen her in years, spoken with her in years, but she was one of the people who I said, I'm thinking about being an actor. You guys have inspired me. I've been bitten by the bug. I'm thinking about acting. And initially I would tell some of the drama students there, and they would sort of pat me on the head like, you're so cute. Just, you're such a good clarinet player. Keep playing the clarinet. Don't do this.
Yeah.
But she's like, you know what? There's a guy, his name's Jonathan Sticks. Go talk to him. If you're serious about it, go talk to him. So I went and I talked to him. And he's like, hey, if you want to do it, go for it. He's like, auditions are coming up. Audition. If you want to go for it, go for it. And I went and I actually auditioned for the drama school.
At Juilliard?
Yep.
Wow.
And I didn't get in.
Yeah.
And I didn't know anything about that life at all. I'm going to tell you guys, you're going to laugh. I auditioned with a scene from the movie Wall Street. Michael Douglas's scene about money is greed is money. That was my audition scene. That, and I think a scene from Platoon or something like that, right? Like I had no clue. So needless to say, I didn't get in. But then I saw Mr. Sticks after, and I guess he could see that I was down. He's like, well, what happened? You know, and he was in the audition. He's like, so, you know, he already knew how it went, but he's like, how'd it go? I was like, well, I didn't get in. He's like, well, you know what? Sometimes we make mistakes. And him saying that, he's like, you know, sometimes we make mistakes. This is what I want you to do. Go get this magazine. It's called the Backstage Magazine. Bring it to me and we'll find you a school that you can go to.
Wow.
Like that. And that's what I did. I went, I got the Backstage Magazine. There was this newspaper at that time. Found this school, the acting studio, James Price Acting Studio, which teaches Meisner. And that's where I started going outside of Gilliard to learn, to learn acting. And so after Gilliard, after I left Gilliard, after the senior stuff, and I was in Baltimore, and then I'm like, well, I got to go back to New York because I'm acting now. I'm going to be an actor. I'm doing this acting thing. And I got back to New York. Not long after being back, I started working. You know, you know a guy named Victor Lawrence? Do you remember Victor Lawrence? Victor Lawrence was a cellist.
Sounds very familiar. Yeah.
You're behind me. And Victor Lawrence, he one of my greatest friends, best friends. He's like godfather to my kids, one of the godfathers to my kids. His mother was working in a law firm. And she gave me my first job. I don't know if you knew that I worked in the mailroom. That was my work study job.
I do remember that. I do remember that.
In the mailroom. Me and Robert DeLutis, this guy Mike Jones, who was a bassist, Victor Lawrence, a cellist. So anyway, Vic's mom was working in this law firm, and they needed like a utility guy to run errands and stuff like that. And she hired me out of Juilliard, like after I left school. So I came back to New York. I went to work there in this law firm, and on the side, you know, trying to audition for stuff. And back then they had open calls. So you could look in the Backstage Magazine and they'd be like, you know, independent movie auditioning, independent, blah, 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 you know, seeing kids for background, for background players. And you could just show up on the street, wait in line and audition. And I went to this open call. I auditioned for this part, and there was this movie called Straight Outta Brooklyn, and I got the lead in the movie.
Wait, that was your first gig? Did you ever take other auditions?
Now or
no,
then?
No. Did you take auditions before that? For
Oh yeah, I went in for a bunch of I went in for what was it called? The movie Lean on Me, I think with what is his name? Morgan Freeman, I think. The movie Lean on Me. I went in on an open call for that. They were just looking for kids to be in the background and possibly play this tough kid part, you know. And I went in for that. You show up, you stand in line, and the casting director comes down and he's like, you know, pretend that you're trying to break into a locker that doesn't belong to you. Go. You know? And then you just start acting like, yo, this is my locker, you know, this is my locker, whatever, you know, you're improvising. And then they're like, all right, next. And then, you know,
completely different from like a clarinet audition where you're practicing 8 hours a day for 3 months and, you know, I can't get these 8 bars. You have no idea what to expect, right?
Well, in that kind of scenario, that's what that was about back then, you know. Like the movie that I eventually got, I got there to the thing, and then they give you the sides, the things to learn right there while you're waiting in line. You got to learn it while you're waiting in line. And then you get up there and then you act it the best you can while you're, you know, on the day. And so I ended up getting that part, the Straight Outta Brooklyn thing. That movie went to Sundance, won special jury prize. I was the star of the movie, and that was my entrance into the acting world. You know, it was,
okay, but hang on, man, you're moving way too fast for me. So
all right,
how long since you were like how long from the time you didn't get into Gilliard as an actor till that moment?
Okay, so I don't want to date myself, but I guess I have to here. Right? Because I was like, don't talk about age, don't talk about this. I'll just say this. I'll say this. I was supposed to graduate, right? So my first movie came out, Straight Outta Brooklyn, came out 2 years after the year I was supposed to graduate.
Okay, so you were studying acting for 2 years, basically.
Basically, yeah, really like a year.
Okay.
Because Straight Outta Brooklyn came out. We shot Straight Outta Brooklyn the year before it came out. So I stopped school. The following year, I shot Straight Outta Brooklyn. The next year, it came out in movie theaters. That's how kind of quick it happened.
Yeah, but hold on. I mean, this is fascinating. You were talking about, I mean, you started this interview like, Bill Blaney taught me about hard work and putting hours to the grind. So, and then I go in and Dave Weber was doing this. And now, how was that training? And you were the weird kid on the block. Now, how was that different for that year or two as an actor? What are the similarities?
So my acting training life, as I was telling you, when I was a senior, I was studying outside, like Jonathan Sticks found in school. So I was studying outside. And I already sort of, was fading out of Gilliard. So as you know, the life of a young classical musician, you spend a lot of time in a practice room, right? It's you and the four walls and your instrument. When I get into acting school, I remember on the very first day, my acting teacher, he's like, what we're gonna do is we're gonna break you down. He's like, you've learned all of these, as a kid growing up in this society, and you've learned all these rules and all these regulations and blah, 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 blah. We're going to break you down and break. And I remember sitting there going, good luck. Here I am. I've got a work ethic. I've got a structure. I've lived that life for all these years. So I'm like, yeah, you're never cracking this. Right? So I'm going through my acting training, and as an actor, it's about being free. It's about letting go. It's about trusting other people, especially the other actors who you're in the scene with, and trusting the writing and trusting directors. It's about trust. A lot of it is trust. 98% of it is just trusting, and listening and trusting. So I get to this point in my acting class where I'm just not breaking through this certain wall, and I'm not listening, and I'm trying to force things. I'm trying to use my music, structure learning. Look, if I work this way and I got to know what's happening and what I'm doing so that I can make sense of it all. And I wasn't listening. And my acting teacher embarrassed me in class, basically. He's like, just sit down. Just sit down. You're not listening. Just sit down. And on that day, I was like, man, I'm quitting. I was going to quit acting on that day. I can't take this. He embarrassed me in front of the whole class. And, it wasn't one of those moments like at Gilliard where it's like, stop the orchestra, clarinet, first clarinet, you play this part. And I nail it, because I've been practicing it. It was, it's like, you're embarrassed, sit down. And the only thing that made me stay, I remember being on the elevator and was like, I'm out of here, I'm quitting. And from the ride from the elevator down to the bottom floor, I'm like, I can't leave because I'd spent my money, and money is important to me. And I was like, I'm gonna go through this whole program because I spent my money on it. So I'm gonna go through this program. And I came back to the next class, which I'm sure everybody was surprised to see me because people were dropping like flies in acting, man. They drop like flies. Because you have to be so vulnerable. And this is the difference. This is one of the differences between acting and one of the things I was teaching in that class. You saw me with Robert, that I would actually go to Rochester and teach this class and to Robert's students. But one of the differences between music and acting is when you're playing music, a part of you can hide behind your music. You're putting everything into your music and into your instrument. And so you're expressing it all through that. When you're acting, it's just you. you putting yourself in front of everyone to see, right? So you're vulnerable, you know, you're just completely vulnerable. And to do that in front of strangers, in front of people, it takes a lot of courage. But, you know, when you're embarrassed in that way, it cuts into your soul, bro. Like that's a part of, you know. So when I went back, I had to learn, and took a while for me to learn how to let go and be vulnerable in front of people, to just be vulnerable and to trust on that level. You know what I mean? Because that's what it really takes. That's what it really takes. And that's why I love actors. Like I love musicians. I love musicians because what musicians can do is they can look at the little black dots and they can play those little black dots in a way that make me cry. That's like, that's magic, right? That's like supernatural. Like that's a spiritual thing. You can play the little black note, the little black dots in a way that makes someone else cry. That's crazy, right? An actor, I love me some actors because an actor is bearing his soul in front of everyone to see. The courage, the amount of courage that takes to do that is special. It's just special, right? So that was something that I had to go through. You know, it's all, you got to go through the fire with both. And it's both different techniques. As a young classical musician and as an actor, it's different. You're learning in a different way and different things. But what I took from, I did take things from my music life, you know, like the work ethic thing. I did take from that and I used that and I added that to my acting thing. You know, the fact that, okay, if I work in this way, learning my lines, learning lines is like learning your music, learning your line, then by this point, I'll be able to do this with the lines. You know, I can have more fun and, you know.
Okay, so let me get this straight, right? Your first paying acting gig was being the star of an award-winning movie.
Right. I wouldn't say it was paying, but it was because it was this independent movie. It was this kid who had taken like, you know, a summer course at NYU in filmmaking. He wrote this movie and decided he wanted to make this movie about his life. And he wrote it down. The script was as big as like a magazine. And we really improvised that movie. You know, he shot it using credit cards from his parents.
What was that like? I mean, they just threw, you hardly had any training. I mean, you're working in a law firm. This is compared to like years of etudes and skills. You're working in a law firm, you're going part-time at night, and they say, okay, now you're the star of a movie. It's like, okay, I'm not even talking about the success. What was the experience like? Like, did you know what to expect the first day of work? What was that like?
I had no clue. Like, I had no idea. I was learning on the job, bro. I had no idea what that world was about at all. And sometimes I acted like I did, but I had no clue. I was learning every day. And, you know, I learned a lot of wrong stuff too, just because it was an independent movie and a lot of people were learning on the job, you know? And you're like, you know, you're showing up at the director's grandmother's house to shoot a scene, you know, because there's no budget for locations or anything like that. And then, you know, you're working on the scene with the other actor who's playing your father, and you guys literally get into a literal fight because there's no one to say, hey, cut, you don't really fight in movies. Like, you know, it's like, it was just crazy.
No one ever told you that.
It's like there's no, nobody had stage combat. It's like, you know, and the director's not like, cut, you can't really swing or hit him over the head with that bottle, you know, whatever. It was just crazy, man. It was crazy. But, you know, it was real. I'll say that. It was real, you know, and I guess that is one of the things that really came through in the movie, you know, that you could tell that what was being said and what was being felt and all that stuff was real, you know.
So quickly, so move ahead now in your career. Now you've had a very interesting new experience, and now what?
So that happened. And then like Straight Outta Brooklyn happens and it comes out. And I guess if anybody wants to really see how far, wants to date me, then they can just find out when that movie came out and then they'll know. But that movie came out and then all of a sudden I'm getting invited to the Los Angeles premiere of Boys in the Hood. And, I go to like the Los Angeles premiere of Straight Outta Brooklyn of my movie, and like, Stevie Wonder's there and Denzel Washington's there. And like suddenly I'm meeting these people. It was just like I really was in Oz at that point. Like I really was in Oz. Like I'm in Hollywood, dude. And I'm like, I'm meeting these people. And even still to this day, I'll tell you, because at my core, at my heart and my soul, I'm a musician, right? Like that's my natural gift.
Your comfort zone. Melt you down.
Music, I get. Acting is my work. Like I have to work to be an actor. Huh. I work hard to be a good actor. I love being on stage acting. I love being in front of the camera acting. I love it when I'm doing, but it takes work for me to get there. Music is the natural thing. Like I told you, I'm sitting there, I'm trying to sight read Mahler 5 because I get it, I'm like, I can do that, right? So back then when I started and I'm in the room with all these people, I'm at these parties and I felt like an imposter. Uh-huh. And still to this day, when I'm in a room with those people, although after Straight Outta Brooklyn came out, I went back to school and studied at the Stella Adler Conservatory because I was like, I'm not a good enough actor. I need more training. I went back and studied some more because I knew. And that's also, that taps back into my music training and learning when, you're just not ready yet. You need to learn more. And I'm a strong, I'm a advocate for training and learning. So I knew in my mind and in my heart that I wasn't ready after Straight Outta Brooklyn and I went back to school. But even still, I feel like I'm an imposter when I'm in a room full of actors, when I'm, starting a new play or starting a new show or, in an audition room, whenever. I still feel like an imposter in this world. And what's great, like a lot of actors, because they don't know that, they don't know how much I'm still connected with music and tied into that. Sometimes it comes across, like I come across sometimes as being kind of standoffish and it's just, I'm shy, I'm nervous, I'm afraid when I'm in a room full of actors because they trained on a certain level, they knew what they wanted to do for a certain amount of time, they've been with actors for a long time, they lived that kind of life at a younger age or whatever, and they just, they feel comfortable in that world the way that I feel comfortable in the world when I'm sitting around, a room full of classical musicians or a room full of musicians, period. So yeah, it's still hard for me.
So in your world now, I mean, you've been in an acting world for a long time now.
Yeah, a long time.
Right? So like, is it common knowledge amongst your colleagues? Oh yeah, Larry, he was like a serious classical clarinet player. Do they all know this? Is this?
They don't all know. Yeah. They don't all know, but people know now at this point. It's on Wikipedia, and I've said it enough, and like I'm starting to play again a little bit now. So,
that's what I wanted to add. I want to talk about during too, because you are coming back to it, and we'll talk about that too. But so in you, I mean, you've never lost this part of this, the studies, the scales as a high school kid. You're getting all the success as an actor, but you're still a musician at heart. You're an imposter. What was there any role the clarinet was playing over 10 years? Did you literally just put it away for 10 years, 20 years, or what? How connected were you? Yeah.
So, yeah, years would go by where I would pick it up maybe twice. It's like there's nothing that's gonna motivate you to want to do something more than seeing somebody else do it poorly, right? When you're good. So sometimes, like, I'd be watching, like, I turn on the TV and I'd see a clarinet player and I'm like, oh my God, he is just hacking away at that thing. Oh, and then I would pull my horn out and just doodle a little bit. And, you lose your chops. So you can, like, you can only play the horn for 10 minutes or 15 minutes before you're just like, in pain. And then you take it apart. And there were years where that's what I would do. And also, I mean, I wasn't completely out of music because, like I said, I'm a self-taught drummer. So I bought a drum set, like an electric drum set, because I lived in an apartment. And I started just learning drums. And I would do that more than the clarinet. But my horn was always never far away. I could always look over in a corner and it was there. Like it's a part of me, right? So it was never far away. And like I said, once or twice or, a couple of times a year, I would just pick it up and just, play like, a line from Mozart Clarinet Concerto, just play a little doodle or a little something, concertino or whatever, and then put it away. And then eventually, I don't know what it was. Oh, I do know what it was because so music and clarinet specifically for me at this point is like, I need a purpose. I need a reason to practice. It's not easy building your chops up. I get music, I know it and I love it, but actually building your technique up ain't easy. And the older you get, the harder it is. So you need a reason to want to do it. Bill Blaney, a few years, maybe 4 years ago, Robert DeLutis had a party. And Bill Blaney said, hey, what are you doing? And I'm like, well, every now and then I pick up the horn and I play. And he goes, you need to come and play with my concert band in Seattle.
I remember that, yeah. Weber Concertino, right?
Concertino, right. He didn't say concertino. He's just like, you need to play something. Come and play, pick a solo. And bing, that's all I needed, motivation, a reason. And
well, what I remember about that, you posted some of it or all of it, I can't remember, on social media, and I saw it, and the first thing I thought, wow, he's pretty cool and calm and all that. And that's the first thing I wrote. I said, Larry, man, this is awesome. You're coming back and I get more nervous than you do. And you're like, dude, you didn't see what happened before the tape.
Right.
Not all about it.
Yeah, no, man. I was, I hadn't done it in years and years, in many years. And there's another story too that I'm going to tell, but I hadn't done it in years on that level. So the nerves were just off the chain. But like Schifrin said, he's like, you have a foundation, an amazing foundation. It will be here for you if you want to come back. And sure enough, bro, man, I mean, from when Mr. Blaney said, I want you to do it, was a year between that and the actual concert. So I had a year to just shed, just sit and play and work it back and have fun and get my groove back, and then, here it comes the day of the show and I'm going to do this thing. And it went like a breeze, bro. It was just so amazing. It was just magical. I had so much fun. My wife and kids were there and it was outdoors and it was just amazing. I had a great time. And I just felt like I'm back, right? That's how I felt, like I'm back. It's feeling good. And then he invited me to come a few more times out to Vancouver, Washington, and play some chamber music and to talk about my life and my story, to talk to some other young, musicians and young cats, just about my life and my road through music into acting and now back into music. And things were going great. And then, dude, I crashed and burned. And you don't know about that story yet. I don't know if you want to get to that yet.
No, we're sick of all the success, Larry, man. We want to hear some crash
about the crashing and burning. I've had some crashes and burns in my acting life too, but this. So okay, a little over a year ago, things were going great. There's a woman who her name is Lisa Bellamore. We met when I was living in LA. I lived in LA for 10 years, and I salsa dance. So I was out dancing salsa one night, and I meet this woman, Lisa Bellamore, who was good friends with Eric LaSalle, who's an actor. You guys might know Eric LaSalle from, he was in Coming to America.
Oh, and yeah.
He was on that. He played the black doctor, the African American doctor on what was the one with Noah Wiley and
anyone in the audience know these?
What is that TV show? It's a medical show. It was like one of the first real serious good medical shows. After St. Elsewhere though, but
we're looking for people in the audience.
Okay. So anyway, Eric LaSalle was on that show. He's one of the leads on that show. And he was dancing with Lisa Bellamore because he's dancing salsa. And me and Lisa start talking. And I'm like, oh, so what do you do? She goes, oh, I work for the LA Phil. I'm like, oh, well, I went to Gilliard, I played clarinet. She said, what? Yeah, so we built this relationship, her and I. She would invite me to come hear the Phil. And I would see some of my old Gilliard colleagues like playing in the LA Phil. So about a little over a year ago, she hits me up and she goes, Larry, I see that you're playing clarinet again. And there's this show called From the Top. Here, they run out of Boston, near Boston, and they highlight young classical musicians, and they're having their 25th anniversary, and they want you to host the show. She puts me in touch with them. And I'm like, that's awesome. I'll do it. Anything that has to do with youth, I'm down. I'll do it. So I hit them up and I talked to the guys up there, and they're like, hey, if you want, you can play something too. We'd love to have you play on the show. Huh. And I'm like, awesome. I'm down. I'll do it. Oh my God. So Andy, there's two pieces. At the time I was working up two pieces. One was a Beethoven trio. And the other was Harlequin. Huh. Now I never played Harlequin. Robert recorded it. Robert DeLutis, he recorded it, but I never played Harlequin. But I absolutely love this piece. I love Harlequin. And I'm like, I always wanted to play it, never had the chance. I'm gonna play either Harlequin or this Beethoven piece. Bah, 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 bah. Finally, the guy gets back to me. He's like, well, which play? You got to let us know what you want to play. If you want to play the chamber piece or you want to play Harlequin. I'm like, I'm going for it. I'm playing Harlequin. I'm challenging myself. That's what I'm doing. I'm playing Harlequin. It'll be fine. Dude. And I can play the piece, like I can play it. The problem is, the thing that happened was I get there, I get to the stage. This ain't concert band in the park on a Saturday afternoon. Dude, this is like it's like the Carnegie Hall of Boston. And this school, what's the name of the school? I can't think of the name, but they're having their 25th anniversary. And they're like, they're this big, well-known classical music training school that cranks out like classical music stars. And it's like all these classical, people, alumni coming back, they're playing on the concert. Young students that are there, they're playing on the concert. And me, right, hosting the show and thinking I'm gonna play Harlequin, bro. And dude, oh my God. It was a train wreck. Absolute train wreck, right? I had to stop. Like I had to stop and go back and start. And I slowed it down. Like it was half speed. It's like, but eventually I sweated my way through the piece. And they clapped for me because the classical music world, they can be forgiving. They forgave me for the travesty. And then I went back to hosting the show, which the hosting the show was, it was great. Like I was interacting with the other students and making jokes, and that was fun. That was great. Needless to say, after the show, I had to go and confront everybody, other people, and because they have the after party thing. I had to go do the champagne thing, and everyone talked about the hosting. No one talked about the playing. But so what happened after that, after I crashed and I'll say, like, you can probably find the recording of that show with me hosting that show. You will not hear me playing Harlequin on that because they took it out. That's what happened.
So what's going on now? So you're practicing? Okay. Yeah.
So after that, I was like, I know I'm a smart man. I've been here, I've been in this world, I've been in this life. And what you got to do when you fall, you crash and burn, you got to get back up on that horse, right? And that's what I said. I'm like, I'm going to get back up on that horse. I'm going to do that. I'm going to record Harlequin, and I'm going to do a recording. And that's why I was thinking about Anthony, thinking about doing the double clarinet concerto and with Anthony McGill, and playing some jazz stuff that I was thinking of doing, and all these things that I've got, I've always wanted to play. I'm like, I'm going to record them. And dude, that I didn't realize how low going through that experience brought me down so low that I really haven't picked up the horn since. Like I've been, I don't know, intimidated by it.
But let's go back to some recent-ish happy memories, right? Now, weren't you on a Broadway show a few years ago?
I did an off-Broadway show.
Right. And I specifically remember you're about to make, it's opening night. It's a half an hour. And you turn on the iPhone. You're like, you know what I'm going to do to relax? I'm just going to play the clarinet. And I thought that was so great.
Right. So I would practice at the theater, right? Like at rehearsals, in between we take a break and rehearsals go to lunch, I would go into my dressing room, up to the dressing room, and I would practice the clarinet. And it was great. It was a David Mamet play, and it was a fun time. I hadn't been on stage. I've been doing mostly film and TV stuff, so I hadn't been on stage in like 9 years or 10 years or something. So that was a little bit intimidating and frightening in itself, but it felt so good to be back up on stage. But I would practice the clarinet. I had my clarinet at the theater. So, but check this out, bro. I remember when we were at Gilliard, Woody Allen, who's a clarinetist, he was playing at Michael's Pub or whatever.
Right, on Mondays. Right? Yeah.
Yeah. And every now and then people would go and check him out. So he comes to see the play that I'm doing. And I'm like, holy smoke, Woody Allen's coming to see this play. This is awesome, right? I'm going to have him sign my clarinet case. That was the day before was the day I took my clarinet case home.
Oh no.
So I get to the theater and I find out that Woody Allen is coming. I'm like, oh, this is awesome. And Woody Allen comes backstage and I'm like, I'll be right back. And I go to my dressing room and my clarinet's not there. I'm like, oh my God. I come back out. I'm like, so I'm a clarinetist and I run this whole thing downtown. I'm like, I'm a clarinetist. I went to see you play at Michael's years ago when I was in school and I wanted you to sign my clarinet case, but I took it home yesterday. He was very cool. He's like, you're clarinetist. Yeah, but who'd you study with? And, we talked clarinet for a little bit. And then the other actors were there too. So it couldn't be all about me. So and then we talked about the play. And Mamet was there that day too. So we talked about the play. But that was a missed opportunity, man. I never got Woody Allen to sign my clarinet case that day.
In fact, at Gilliard, I've told the story many times, but Benny Goodman rode the elevator with me, and I couldn't get the courage to shake his hand. He went off to rehearse with Homer Mensch, the bass professor.
Yes.
Morton Gould's Benny's gig, right? He had never performed it, right? He goes home, and I'm like, dude, why couldn't you just shaking his hand with him? Don't worry, you'll have another chance. And he dies that night.
Oh no!
And apparently never performed the piece. Yeah.
Oh no!
So I know what that's like. So let's talk about Gilliard. When you were there in Broadway, I remember you were posting. You were so impressed that you found there was a music stand always outside of the rehearsal room. Rehearsal.
Yes.
You found a piece of gum that you put behind the stand 35 years ago. You were so proud of yourself.
I said that. I was like, Andy's gonna be remembering stuff that I had totally forgotten about. Yeah.
You were warned.
That's right. The stands had Gilliard written on them. I was like, what? Gilliard stands. Oh man, I'll probably find a piece of gum back here. Yeah, man. That was
so I'm curious, like you were like, the weird guy in the neighborhood. You were doing classical music. You were stubborn. This was who you are. Like you said, you were the only black kid sometimes in the entire thing. And then a lot of your roles, it was like it was. Now you're surrounded by African American actors. It was a story. What was that kind of social thing like? You were used to being the maverick, and now we're going back into a different way.
Yeah, it was weird, and it's hard. It's hard, because a part of you feels like you're being drawn, although it's like it's your hood, it's your people, but because I was disconnected from that life for so long, I'm coming back to it, so I'm feeling a bit foreign to that world. And although it's a part of me, but even when it was a part of me and I was going home to it every day, I was still going to the School for the Arts. I was going home to it every evening, but I was at the School for the Arts during the day, which was a whole different world. So now I'm an actor and I'm in a show like The Wire and I'm back in Baltimore, I'm a bit foreign to it, because although I lived in it, I wasn't of it. I wasn't of that life and of that world that I was portraying on the show.
Yeah, amazing.
But I had enough. The reason why I did connect is because I had enough friends growing up in Baltimore in the hood who did live that life, and they were a part of that life, and even family members who are of that life. And so I know what it was about, although I didn't live it personally. I know what it was about, so I could connect myself with it. You know what I mean? But even still now, it's weird. It's weird, I still feel like an imposter in a way when I'm in certain situations and certain scenarios. But I am who I am. Like, I know, you have to be you, so I don't try to be when I'm in that place, or in a room or on the set or whatever with, cats who lived a certain lifestyle or existence that's different from mine. I don't try to be that or do that. I'm like, this is who I am, and this is what you get when you get me. You know what I mean? It doesn't stop me from working with other people in a certain way. As you know, when you come to what's important is that when you come to the table, you come to the table prepared. You come to the table with what you bring to the table. That's it. And that's where the magic is, really. It's not about so much assimilating and becoming a part of and being with like somebody else is or whatever. No, it's bringing your special herbs and spices to the table. That's what makes the magic.
So let me ask you a tough question. I think it'll be tough for you to answer. Two-part question. Are you a role model? Okay. And to what kind of people are you a role model? What are you kind of preaching, and who connects with you?
If I am a role model, which I don't mind being a role model, like I love talking to kids and the youth, and I love being an example of how to, sort of bring yourself up out of situations. And those for me personally are the kind of stories that I like to tell, that I gravitate toward, people overcoming adversities and situations. And and achieving certain achieving your goals and achieving dreams. And so I don't mind being in that position. I try to speak to all people of all walks of life, all situations, all demographics of people. I think my story lends itself to that because I've been in different situations, because I was in, that classical music world, but then also I grew up in that hood world, and in the movie, TV movie world and the stage world. They're all very different, but they all, when you go through that existence, that life, it all adds to you, your person, your character, and it all gives you a certain, you lived a certain experience that you can share, and I try to speak to everyone. I try to just speak to everyone. And I don't think there's any, and not just in the world of arts, but in any, no matter what a kid wants to do, there's a path. And there's certain things that you can teach a kid about a work ethic. Even though I learned my work ethic in the world of classical music, you can use those same techniques, working hard, and there are things that you can use if you want to be an engineer. You know what I mean? You learn this, this particular type of math that you need, or whatever, you need this, you learn this, and it will give you the ability to do that. You know what I mean? There are things that you can share that will help no matter what the path is, no matter what a kid wants to do, or even an adult who wants to change career paths or whatever, So and I'm still learning. I mean, it's a constant. Life is a learning experience.
So what I'm actually fascinated by, and I think it's a little bit relevant. Like right now, musicians, we don't know whether we're live. We don't know. People are resorting to all kinds of recordings, whatnot. I was really curious when you said, okay, I did Broadway. I hadn't done live theater in like 10 years. I did band. I hadn't done this, and the nerves are going. Right. And then you had done the movie thing. You didn't know what's going on the first time. So what are those experiences like? I mean, how are they different from each other, or what are the pros and cons of them, and how are they different?
When you're going into a situation and you don't know what to expect, this is one thing that I learned. This is what I learned from acting, actually. This is what I learned from acting training. When you're going into a situation you don't know what to expect, the best thing to do is to listen. Be open, be free, and to listen. Listen to what's going on. And then add, like I said, your special flavors and your spices and your experiences to the situation. That's the best course to take, to listen and learn. And I've been in there a whole lot of times. When you're returning, there was a time, speaking of like returning to the theater after a long period of time, returning to music after a long period of time. There was a moment in my acting career when I was in Los Angeles when I wasn't booking, I wasn't working, right? It's like I couldn't get a job, and I was freaking out because I've got a family and I wasn't working. And this is what I mean when I say you can learn. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to necessarily learn something from an artist. You don't have to learn just because, or clarinetist just because you're a clarinet player, or an actor because you're an actor. You can, and I stress this to students, you can learn from experience. Get out into the world and experience things, read a lot, go to the museums, go to music, go to lectures. You can learn from anything. So I'm not booking jobs. I'm reading this magazine. In this magazine, Tiger Woods is talking, during this article. He goes, you know what? I was putting, and my putting was all, it was like so awful, my putting. I changed my putting, so many times that I didn't even know what I was doing. It was awful. So I decided to just go back to my basics. Go back to my basic stroke. I went back to my basic stroke. That's what he said in his article. I'm watching this TV show, and they're talking about this basketball coach, right? And how he's influenced all these other these basketball players, and they're, superstars now, whatever, in the NBA. And they're like, talking to this coach, and he's like, you know, when a student comes to me, he's like, basketball is a simple game. It's dribble, pass, and shoot. That's it. That's the 3 elements: dribble, pass, and shoot. He's like, then these guys, they get into the NBA and they start doing all this fancy stuff. He's like, and now they can't shoot a free throw. Right? He's like, the free throw is the easiest thing. You're just standing on the line. Nobody's guarding you. You're standing on the line, shooting the ball up, right? You can't shoot a free throw because you're changing everything, the simple stuff. He's like, and I tell them, go back to your basics. And it just, I'm like, you know what? I'm not booking. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go back to my basics. So what did I do? I pulled out my old acting training book, and I'm going to, what does this character want? What does this character need in this scene? What are you really doing in this scene? What is your location? Like all the basic things you learn from the beginning. And I just started working on those things day after day. My warm-up exercises, all the things that, you know, once you think you reach a certain level, you don't have to do those things anymore, right? And as you know, as a musician, you have to practice, you know, every night you got to practice, you got to keep it fresh. Anyway, I went back to my basics and I started booking jobs again.
Huh.
And so, you know, there's going to come a time when, and I say this, you know, there's going to come a time when things aren't, you can't work through a lick or something, or you can't work through, your lines aren't. Sometimes you just have to go back to your basics, man. You got to go back to your basics. Like Schifrin said, you got a good foundation. It'll be here for you. You know? And so and I say all that, you know, to say when you get into a situation where it's like, okay, I'm coming back to this. Holy crap, what's going to happen? Start with the basics. Okay, be open, be free, listen a lot. 90% of acting is listening. A lot of people think 90% of acting is saying the lines. It's not. 90% of acting is listening to what the other person is saying and then responding to it honestly. That's what it is. Oh, it's like chamber music. Chamber music, 90% is listening to what's going on around you and then, you know, adding your part and making it a whole, but it's working together, listening to what everyone else is doing so that you match what they're doing, right? And making the magic happen in that way, right? So
fantastic. That's a super advice, I think. Yeah. Fantastic. Simplify it, go right back to the basic, and it solves so much. So listen, I mean, you've had an incredibly remarkable, you know, life. I'm so, you know, demoralized that all these great things happened to you once I left your life, you know.
You got to give me 1 second, Andy. I'm sorry. I have to disappear for 1 second because my computer is not plugged in. I need to plug it up.
Okay, go.
It's really like on 8%. I'm going to run away. Sorry, guys. I'm going to run away and run right back. I'm sorry. Be right back.
Just stay with us. We're going to wind it down. I think it's very, very interesting talk, and we're going to wind it down soon. As soon as he figures out how to plug in the computer. Thanks. By the way, Lorenzo, have I introduced you today? Speaking. Have you
I'm trying to handle these technical difficulties?
Okay. He's coming back.
I'm almost wire going in. Okay, save the day. Sorry, guys.
Listen, no, thanks a lot. But, you know, that was fantastic what you just said. We're going to wrap it up. I mean, you know, you've had your hard knocks, you've had your direction changes, your successes, your failures to this day. I mean, you're getting you know. So what advice are you going to give young people other than go back to basics in times of trouble? We're facing, you know, very uncharted, unpredictable territory in the arts, but as someone who's dabbled in, well, more than dabbled in several art forms, you know, really loves them in different ways, had completely different training experiences. what are you going to tell people? What are you going to, just life experience, arts experience, how we're going to face the situation that we're facing right now?
You know, so much is just up in the air, and there are those times in life, and it's the hardest times in life, because what we learn to do in our craft and just in life in general is, we as humans is to control what's going on, you know, trying to control our lives, controlling our art, you know. But then there are those moments in life that happen where it's the scariest moments, where you realize that you have no control over anything. Like you literally just have no control. You have no answers and you have no control. So this is one of those moments I'm feeling personally, and I'm sure a lot are, where there are no answers, you know, and there is no control. And in those moments, I have found that the best thing to do is just let go. Like right now, I'm living day by day, bro, right? I'm just like, okay, I woke up today. What am I gonna do to make myself happy today? You know, what am I gonna do? And I still do things for my art and for my craft. I'm like, what am I gonna do as an actor today? Right? Am I gonna read a play? Am I gonna work on a dialect? Am I going to, you know, what am I gonna do for my art? Which is also gonna just feed me. And then what am I gonna do for my life? What am I gonna do with my family today? What am I gonna do? You know, am I gonna go out in nature? Am I gonna, you know, am I gonna go and try to get some new experience in some way? And I've been personally just going through my days, going day by day, getting through the days like that. What am I gonna do now in this moment, and trying to be in the present moment? And eventually, all this stuff will, you know, the wheels will start to turn again, and things will get back to some type of normalcy. It won't be like it was, but it will be something new. And we will then be able to answer some questions and have some control over something and get back to, you know, get back to life. But right now in these times, dude, I'm just trying to do my best to stay sane, locked in the house.
How's that been working out for you?
It wavers, bro. It's like, you know, stay sane and to just try to enjoy these moments, this moment right now. Because how often are we like, you know, oh my gosh, I could use a vacation. Well, this is.
Guess what?
Guess what? You asked for it. So I'm just trying to enjoy every moment of every day right now until this all blows over and things get back to some type of normalcy. And that's what you do when you get to these moments where you have no control, and you know, just let the universe take over.
Great.
You know.
Wonderful. Lawrence, man, I mean, what a pleasure to catch up with you. Last time I saw you, you were just a dumb kid. Now you're just a dumb adult, like the rest of us. Fantastic story. I mean, really had a lot of great, you know, great turns. So anyway, don't be a stranger. I'll send you the maker of the T-shirt.
Yes, please. I want that, bro. That's awesome.
Okay.
Thank
and
you.
Thanks for everything you did, and thank you so much for spending time with a bunch of clarinet geeks. We wanted to connect you with your inner self, the real Lawrence.
Hey, man, I'm a part of that collective, so you know, I'm a part of it. I'm a part of you guys. So, no, definitely, it's great to see you. I thank you so much for thinking of me, for thinking about me, for having me on your show, and to talk. And yeah, man, we definitely don't be strangers. We definitely got to catch up. I have to get to Hong Kong at some point.
Please.
In my life. Like I got to do that. My daughter's studying Japanese. She's actually learning, and she wants it. So we're going to come out east, out that way, do China, do Hong Kong, do Japan. We're going to do it all.
Robert came out, I guess it was less than a year ago, and we had a good meal together. So You know, by the way, he says it's because of you that that he met his wife.
Yes.
Yeah. She was a fan of The Wire or something, and he introduced something. I can't remember the whole thing, but he credits you with that.
Yes, so that movie Straight Outta Brooklyn, I went up to teach that class up in Rochester, and the Kodak Foundation, which Kodak Films. Yep. So they have like this, they don't have it up there anymore, but they had all the, like, I don't know, the 35 millimeter. I don't know if they're 35 millimeter. You know how they played the movies back in the old days? They had the big cases. So they had all these movies in storage up there, Kodak, because it was all on Kodak film. And one of the movies they had was Straight Outta Brooklyn. And his wife worked for the Kodak place. Huh. And when he posted that I was coming up to teach the class, and they saw like the flyer somewhere and invited me to come and do a screening of that movie, Straight Outta Brooklyn. Huh. And they wanted to show me the Kodak, like the factory, you know, the Kodak factory. So I took Robert with me to see the Kodak factory, and his wife was working there. They didn't know each other at all. And so it was him taking me there where he met her. That's where he met her. And so they credit me. Yeah, you're welcome, Robert. If you're welcome, Robert and Patty. Love you guys. Love you. But yeah, man, he's absolutely right. Yeah.
That's beautiful. So anyway, Lawrence, thank you so much. I hope you guys, this was a very different show, but I thought it was just the perfect thing to break things up and make all kinds of weird connections and reconnections in the case of me and my old buddy here. So take care, and we'll see you next week, hopefully.
You got it, Nandy. Take care, man.